stayed up way too late last night. There were so many things that have been added to streaming platforms that I just kind of got in a roll, started a movie, and then went right to the next one. And by the time I happened to look at the actual clock, it was very late. I'm just gonna say, like, I don't even want to say what time it is, so we're a bit tired this morning, but excited because today is day number 5 of our 13 Nights of Poe countdown, and I know that you've already squished this bag. You probably have some ideas of the name. Shout it out down below. We are so freaking creative here. I would love to know all of the names that you came up with. Okay, bag number 5, super squishy. We have a brand new colorway of yarn, and the name of it is Skull. A bone-chilling color that really expands and kind of blooms as you're working it up. So it's hard to see when it's all caked up like this, but there are little bits of pops of color in here that as we're working it up on our pattern, you're gonna see, and it is incredible against the Nevermore color. We need to give her a moment though. This Nevermore, I am never going to get tired of it. It is quite possibly one of my favorite reds, just for the fact that it is a tweedy red and it has the black tweed running throughout it. Anything that gets put on top of it, it's just gonna look fantastic. But the skull color yarn, it's amazing. So I am gonna work this up. We're gonna get started, you and I, on this part together, and then I'm gonna let you go and do your thing. Here is the second part of the pattern, which is also in the bag. So it says the yarn Muse 2320 Pipit colorway is Skull, a 75% superwash merino wool and 25% nylon. And here is the pattern that we're going to be working on today. We're going to do a little cross stitch action. This is a technique that I have not done in a very long time. So as Sarah and I were getting this box together, just like in idea form, I had to brush up a little bit. I have quite a few projects laying around that are now covered in cross stitch. A lot of cardigans got redecorated with little patches of cross stitch. Okay, things that we're gonna need: a stitch marker, which was in day 3, so we have our Poe stitch marker that we're gonna use, and a blunt tip embroidery needle, which came in yesterday's, our cute little tin notion holder. There is the yarn needle. We're gonna use that one, not the pokey, sharp one that I was like, hey, as you pull this out, be careful. Not that one, the other one. It's a little bit thicker, and it's gonna work better with the technique that we're doing today. The rest of it on the back is the entirety of the pattern, just to kind of get you started. But again, we're going to walk through it together. Do have an extra bit of mystery to this portion of the mystery pattern. If your gauge didn't quite come out like mine, you don't have the 45 rows, or you had to shorten it up a little bit, we have options for this portion of the pattern. So there are 3 different varieties to the pattern picture that we are going to be creating. And even if you did make gauge and you like this one, but you see these and you're like, actually, I like that one a lot better, go that direction. They are all going to be on my blog. You might end up liking all of them and want to use them for different projects later on. Print them all out, collect them, put them in your little binder, in your junk journal that you're making. Just go ahead and snag all of them. If you're following along on this graph portion, we are going to count over 18 stitches from the bottom edge of our cast on tail. So this thing right here, we're gonna place our Poe stitch marker right at stitch number 18. On the graph, 18 stitches over is right underneath the chin of the skull, which is the middle of the project. It looks a little crazy because of how long it is, but again, this is gonna be folded in half. So this is middle. The cross stitch part, I like to work my patterns from left to right, and I only do what is in that row. So I go left to right, then move on to the next row, left to right. This way the stitches are all leaning in the same direction and they're all nice and lined up. That means I only take a small bit of yarn when I have rows like this very first one that I'm gonna work up. I don't need that many stitches. How many do we have? 2, 4, 5. We have 5 stitches that we're going to work up. So not a lot of yarn. Attach it onto my yarn needle. And now we're ready to go. All right, so this one is at stitch number 20. So we're just going to count over 2 stitches from 18 and start there. Each cross stitch is going to be worked over 1 stitch. Counting over 1, 2, and we're going up 1 row. I like to start in the top left corner. So working from the back side, placing the yarn needle in that top left corner of the first stitch and pull that through, leaving a nice tail so I can go ahead and weave that in when I'm done with this part. Now, from the left-hand corner, I'm going to go down to the right bottom corner and insert that. Now we have the first part of the X created. Next, the top right-hand corner, working from behind the project, pulling the yarn needle through. Careful not to get it tangled in the back. But you do want it to be nice and snug. So for this last one, we're doing the bottom left-hand corner of the stitch, pulling that through. And we're going to give it a tug. If they're not super close to the actual project, it is going to have the opportunity to get snagged on things. And after doing the entire graph, you're not going to want that to happen. So nice and snug. Again, I normally just tie this off at the end just in case I need to readjust anything. Each stitch shares the side of their square. So we're going to do that all over again for the next stitch, starting with the top left-hand side. So working behind again, going right through that same stitch that we just went through, pulling it through. And now we're going to repeat that whole sequence in that same exact order. So our stitches are the exact same, nice and organized. All right, so top left down to bottom right. Pull that through nice and tight. And the bottom left, again, sharing that stitch with the previous stitch. I'm just on a roll now, so I'm going to finish up this entire row. Starting again on that stitch, the left hand top corner where it shares the side, pulling that from behind, down to the bottom right, pulling nice and snug, top right from behind the project, and bottom left, again, we're going to share that corner. Also pay attention to this. I have had many a time where this comes unraveled and I lose it halfway through. Just double checking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, which means I'm finished with this first row in our graph. I like to go ahead and weave it in on the back as I go, just because there are so many rows and it's very easy for it to get tangled in the back. So I just pick up like 1 or 2 and tie this off. Just to double make sure that it's not in my way, I like to weave it back once through all of that yarn, just the color that I'm working with though, not through the Nevermore, and pull it through. Now that I'm over here, I can tie these 2 together. Don't feel like you have to do this many steps in weaving in because really this part, it's the back. So we're not going to be seeing this part. It's just for me
and kind of my sanity as I'm going through the project. I don't like it when it gets tangled and it can be a little bit frustrating. So I just do all the steps that I need to in order to make it as easy as possible and fun. Like, this is a fun project. We don't want this to be frustrating. So there we are. We have the first row of cross stitch. Moving on to row number 3, we have 3 stitches, but it is still across those 5 stitches that we did. So I normally just pull the same amount of yarn that I have because we're going to be skipping these 2 stitches in the middle with that one strand of yarn that I'm using. Just like down here where each stitch shares their side, they also share the bottom and the top. For row number 3, this is going to be the bottom left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner, which means we're going to jump up here to start our first stitch. So top left corner, again, doing it exactly the same way. Top left goes down to bottom right, and you see that it already shares with 2 other stitches. That is still correct. We're going to go right into there. Now top right, and bottom left, again sharing that stitch. Now we're skipping a stitch, but since they share sides, we're only skipping one part of a square. So we have 1, 2, and this stitch right here, that's going to be the top left-hand side of our next stitch. So right underneath it, pull that yarn through. And you can see, because it matches up perfectly with the row down below and the graph, that we have this stitch right here. That is the missing one from this row. Just in case you need to kind of like double check that you're putting it in the right stitch. So pull that tighter, top right corner, and bottom left corner. Now we have one more stitch that we're skipping. So again, counting this side of the stitch, we have 1, 2, and working over in that spot. And there we have the finished part of row number 3. Keep working through the graph. We go all the way up until row number 23. Once you're done with that, second part of the pattern is totally done. Now, don't forget that we have 3 different options for the graph. So if you love this one and you're rolling on it, that's fantastic. But for those that want a couple more options, here we have them. First up, we had to do a raven, one that matches very close to the tin that you got day number 4. Next up is a skull just by itself, but with a little bit more going on. There's some shading, there's a little bit more movement to this one. And lastly, if you are looking for a challenge, a statement piece, a showstopper, this graph is for you. I mean, I don't think I have to say anything more, right? What do we think of the cross stitch technique? Is this something that you've done, like it's already in your repertoire, you do this on patterns all the time, or is it totally new to you slash just needed to be reintroduced like it did to me? I have 100% through and through fallen in love with this again. So yes, very glad that we have all of these patterns available. It's just a Poe explosion. I am going to continue on my skull, have that finished,
Again, I will post it on my Insta story if you're following me over there. As soon as it's done, I will put it up. I like to throw on an audiobook too as I'm working up the cross stitch because I find it to be really relaxing, but it does take a second to get all the way through it, especially if it's new to you. Just roll with it. We're having a calm day. I'm sending you tons of positive, spooky vibes to enjoy the process and work up this next part of our mystery pattern. So that is it for day number 5 of our 13 nights of Poe Crochet and Knit Along. I genuinely hope that you have so much fun working this up. Have a fantastically spooky rest of your day, and as always, I will see you ghouls tomorrow.